A very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first session of Color Cineplex Presents Television Week 2021. To begin with, I would like to thank our presenting partner, Color Cineplex. Can we please have their AV?
छोटे सुना क्या 10 ओवर बोले तो गेम ओवर Abu Dhabi T10 League Season 5 starts 19th November live on Color Cineplex, Rishte Cineplex, and Food Select. Abu Dhabi T10 Season 5 this November 6 live Color Cineplex, Rishte Cineplex, or Par.
Thank you, guys. Moving on to today's session, Big to Bigger, the compelling logic of big budget shows and why they continue to grow. On the panel, we have Pratyusha Agarwal, Chief Consumer and Data Officer at Zee, Neena Elavia Jaipuria, Head Hindi Mass Entertainment and Kids TV Network at Viacom 18, Megha Tata, Managing Director at Discovery Communications, and Abhishek Rege, Chief Executive Officer at Endemol Shine India. Welcome, everyone. Now, introducing you to the moderator of the session, Shrikant Khandekar, co-founder and director at AFAX. Once again, thank you, everyone, for joining us. Over to you, Mr. Khandekar.
Yeah, thanks, Devashish. So, hi, everyone, and welcome, speakers. So, I'm from a generation which was brought up, which did not know what reality shows were. Okay, so I think it was 1995, when Saregama came along for the first time, it was like, wow, what is that? And then there was, 5 years later, Kaun Banega Crorepati came along, changed the fortunes of the Star Network. MTV Roadies came soon after 2003. So I just looked. Indian Idol came in 2004, Big Boss in 2006, Khatron Ke Khiladi in 2008, and Dance India Dance in 2009. And then I'm sure I've missed a few. Okay, so please forgive me for that. But the point was that in the course of just 5-10 years, we saw a lot of a genre of show we did not know existed anywhere. So it was really something. Since then, some of the shows have died out, new ones have come, but some have actually carried on for a very long time. I mean, 10 years and more. There are one or two, well, two. One is more than 15 years old, one is 20 years old, and the budgets seem to be getting bigger. They seem to be traveling more across India. So, they were originally in Hindi. Some of them have gone into several languages. So the question we're going to, discuss today is what is so compelling about this from a business standpoint, that TV networks put a lot of money behind these shows. How does it work for TV networks? Okay. And what are the risks involved? So my first question for all of you would be, please, if you could keep it brief, would be, has the role of the reality show changed since KBC in 2000? I mean, 20 years. Has it changed in any way? And what in industry parlance is a big budget show? I know that big budget show need not necessarily mean a reality show, but very often it means the same thing. Okay, so who'd like to take it? Neena, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. Lovely to be on this panel and meet all of you online. Hopefully, we'll meet in person soon.
Yeah, I know.
Hope all of you are well and double vaccinated to begin with. But yeah, so moving on to your question, Shrikant, I've worked on the first season of several of the shows that you just mentioned.
Really?
Way back in 2003. And from then to now, I think this has only grown. And now I'm going to speak to you from a colors perspective, because I think what these unique marquee properties do for us is actually give colors a very distinct identity. They also help us to bring in the variety, what colors actually stands for today. It really is a key differentiator for us because we believe we have the best of both worlds, and we have a very strong fiction lineup and an equally strong weekend lineup with the impact properties. I think it works from many more angles, from a network perspective as well. Some of these, like you said, shows like Big Boss and Khatron Ke Khiladi have achieved and gained a cult status. And, viewers are eagerly waiting for what's going to happen in every new season. Having said that, it also works for us from a network perspective because it seamlessly integrates for us the new normal, which is the TV and digital proposition in a beautiful way. And of course, we'll talk about it more, but just to leave it at that it is cult, it creates fandom, and it beautifully, seamlessly integrates these two platforms, driving viewership and subscribers. From another perspective, from a network perspective, again, success of the format in one language has a ripple effect on, other regional markets and regional languages as well. And that's helping us in a big way from a Big Boss perspective as well. Third and lastly, I think it's the advertisers' darling as well. And therefore, in a way, our darling, because it works beautifully for us, because as you said, they are big ticket items and they do get a significant part of our top lines from these properties. But having said that, they are darlings of advertisers for two reasons. One is these properties actually bring in newer audiences on the weekend. They bring in family audiences on the weekend. They therefore help to deliver the kind of reach that the advertisers want for their brand. More importantly, also, they are able to communicate with their viewers in a very non-conventional, clutter-breaking manner, because these properties have the ability of integrating and customizing product messages in a way that are being delivered in a very unconventional manner. And therefore, the brand salience stands out. And therefore, typically brands come into the consideration set of viewers much, much, much better than they would have in a vanilla 30-second spot. And therefore, driving reach and brand salience for our advertisers. What it also does for Colors as a network is that it brings in new eyeballs and drives reach on the weekend. And we therefore are able to sample our weekday wares to the audiences on the weekend to entice them to come on to the weekdays. And that gives us a fabulous 7-day strategy, so to speak, and sets us apart as a brand in the GEC genre.
Actually, you brought up several issues which I would like to, bring up again later.
Sure.
Pratusha, do you have a sense of how the role of the show has changed in the last 20 years? Is it different or is it the same? Does it do the same thing for the business? Can't hear you. You're muted.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. And I think, everything that Neena said is absolutely, I kind of echo that. And I think the thing that you are asking, right, how has their role changed? I think there's been a significant shift in the role they play. Obviously, they get new users, they get unique users, they engage a lot better. But let's focus on how has it changed in the last 20 years from the time when we got in the first Saregama and set a kind of a trend in this category to what's happening with these now. I think first and foremost, the fact that originally that being seen as just one content format that gets some audiences versus they being legit brands on their own. And for us, Saregama is as much a brand as a ZTV or a Zee Tamil. Big Dance India Dance is as large a brand as any of the channel brands, right? Because these, like Neena said, they cut across regions and they travel. So when you're launching a Zee Keralam, it's actually the Saregama brand is bigger than Zee Keralam to start with. So when you come there, people know this brand first, and hence your recruitment of audience actually is being driven by these known long format, long-term IPs. So I think that's the way in which the roles changed, as these being really large content brands in themselves. And I think that's one very, very big role that I'm seeing from a brand perspective. The second, I think, like, saying from a cross-screen perspective, and I think our consumers exist in a very seamless multi-screen environment, and they're like really seamlessly traveling in the video verse, right? I think these, while fiction does that, stories do that, characters move, but I think the large format non-fictions are, in that sense, very useful for a network in taking the audience across all three. In fact, I'd add social too, because the buzz that, what Bigg Boss creates on social, it just breaks the charts every time. And for us, when I've seen what it does for a Survivor that we've just done in Tamil, or on social, the way it exploded, it became the #1 show in Tamil Nadu on Z5 on the day of launch. So the OTT gains and how you're able to take your equity from TV audience to social audience to OTT audience, I think is the second role that they're playing very, very differently from where we started. And third, I think is the role in the consumer's life. As people have started demanding a larger, bigger spectacle, we've, from a whole country which kind of propagated restraint and, don't ask for bigger things and, scale and stuff. We've moved from that cultural value to, we demand a better and bigger life. And I think these become markers of that delivery. And that's what we're seeing when we saw what happened on Survivor with Arjun in Tamil Nadu. One would think that need is getting fulfilled that much more. It's not just one celebrity and one scale. I mean, when you would think of the scale that's happening and why people are lapping it up, it's also a cultural value that it's addressing. So on all those three dimensions, it's really working. And lastly, the advertiser point that Nina brought up. Originally for them, it was like, yeah, okay, it's a great opportunity, impact, buy on TV. But for them too, the cross-screen audience and the ability to be in that equity environment, safe environment, and actually target consumers in an interactive, gamified fashion across three screens is again a really big win.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, thanks. Megha, you would have a different perspective, right, on reality shows. So could you share that?
Yeah, Shrikant. So
and you were saying before we started recording that you have some big ones coming up your sleeve, right?
Yes, absolutely. So again, completely echo what Pratyusha and Nina have said. I think fundamentally we all believe in the creative ecosystem that the impact properties do make the eyeballs come your way and create the impact as the franchise speaks about. I think all the names, like you mentioned, they were all in the GEC space. So they were clearly, that's been the beacon of light of talking about sort of impact properties, because they started the trend, and that's where the big bucks are in every which way. I think it was interesting to see how Discovery brought a different perspective to it. For a niche player to play that big game was a risk, right? And but it was a calculated risk, and it paid off. And I think the way we made that sort of dent into this huge market was with our first episode with Prime Minister Modi. And when that happened, everybody sat up and watched us, and they got, okay, these guys can also do some impact properties, and that to me was a very sort of an eye-opening thing for our genre to be competing with the big daddies, and I think that's really set us to success in then what followed, and to have someone called Bear Grylls become a household name in India couldn't have happened had it not been for these big, shows like Into the Wild or Man vs. Wild and so on and so forth. So that episode of PM Modi set us for then, when Thalaiva came, then Akshay came. We had Ajay Devgan, we have Vicky Kaushal, and those were that's the space we really felt created that audience. The audience was used to reality in the space of music, dance, and the big boss variety. But something like this was absolutely new, which really worked really well for us as well. And all the points which were highlighted, it helps the advertiser, it brings in the eyeballs, it creates a cross-pollination of audiences between linear and digital. I think our property also is very meme-worthy. So lots of memes started sort of floating in social, which only helped our franchise as well. And that is not where we only stopped. So then we created, obviously there is an audience for content like ours as well, which is keen to explore big impact, bigger and big, better shows. And then started our journey. And in the last year or so, Discovery has created 10 times more content than in the 25 years of its existence in the country. And that just came about the fact that we saw the success, we tasted success, and we want to explore more. And working with production houses, and going global. I think that's another point Discovery brought to the table. Like episode like of PM Modi and all of our Man vs. Wild, Into the Wild shows get aired in 150 plus countries. Okay. So it is not just our content being consumed in India and being loved by our Indian audiences, but of going international. And that's the scale Discovery was able to bring to the table. So really I think all of us are fully double thumbs up when it comes to such big shows.
Yeah, great. Abhishek, you see this from the other point of view, big format shows, and you've seen this for a very long time. You've been involved in it. What are the big things you think? Okay, so about the last 20 years we've discussed, but is there a new aspect to reality shows that you see which is not often appreciated? I mean, and how it's impacting the TV.
So I could make this really short and say ditto to all three who've just spoken before me.
Always the challenge of being
but I just, if I could just take out my learnings on what has happened and would kind of split it into three parts. Yes. The first one is the eyeballs. We've always looked at bigger non-scripted shows as a loyalty breakers and hoping that they move on to the other shows of whatever platform you're bringing the audiences onto. So that was one of the most critical parts of how non-scripted grew. First by starting to take on Bollywood big time, and then slowly trying to grind up the scale as well. The second thing that really happens is you're trying to create a franchise every time.
Abhishek, could I interrupt you for a minute? I want to ask you, because you have an international perspective. A celebrity is a given now in most of these shows. Okay? Small celebrity, big celebrity, depending on what your budget and what your ambitions are. Is this standard elsewhere in the world as well, that the presenter is almost always a celebrity or a star? I mean, a non-TV celebrity, let's say.
Yeah. So to a much greater extent than it was in the years before. So for us, celebrities is Bollywood, really, right? Yeah. But globally, celebrities are performers. They're usually musicians, singers, who have huge followings. And that's what people then, as broadcasters and platforms, have chosen to get on board to do the right stuff. And that's what's helped them also to reach out to larger audiences. It could be talent shows, it could be whatever. You see the scale of celebrities and the jury there also has been increasing. So I think it's been across the board, across territories, that investment has gone into faces, into scale, into ramping up everything. I think the big difference between us and the West largely is that they can spend that much to make just about 10 episodes of something, so that the impact is far more than what we can afford to. But we have our requirements, as our dependence on advertising is a little higher. So we do need a exposure over an X number of weeks so that the brand gets right value, etc. So I think we're getting there. But yeah, I think that would be the main difference. But everyone's relying on faces to really take it to the next level as well, including scale.
Okay, so has this, overall, I mean, anybody could take this question. Has the share of reality shows, in audience viewership, has it been growing over the years? Is it the same? I tried to find out, I couldn't actually figure out. Has it grown or is it the same? Would any of you have a view on that?
I could just say that the consumption has changed in terms of the way it is consumed. I think OTT has brought in a very different layer to it, wherein people do now consume a lot of this as a catch-up. I mean, I'm saying it catch-up, but loosely, it's got a great library value right now.
Right.
So I think the consumption's gone up drastically. I'm not very sure on the numbers, but that's something that's open.
I could add a perspective there. Don't have the exact number, but definitely as a consumption, a share of the consumption pie, I can talk about, at least from the time I've seen the category data back when I was at Star versus 2017 when I joined Z versus now. I think the share of non-fiction has gone up definitely. The number of formats have gone up. The number of channels doing non-fiction has gone up. I think what's happened though, and that's the worrying trend really, is especially in highly cluttered categories like Hindi GC, the rating per non-fiction, which used to be much, much higher rating per episode, per season, has been steadily coming down. And it's been coming down for the last 3 years. And that's actually a worrying trend, that there is a high need to innovate now, and people are not going to sustain, and that I don't see in any of the regional market. In Bangla, for example, our DID and Saregama still deliver every season on season an incremental TVR. However, and that's not just for one brand or the other, right? It's in Hindi market though, every single year, the average TVR of a non-fiction show has been declining, which is a worrisome trend.
Is that very different from what is happening with fiction?
It's actually worse off in non-fiction than what's happening in fiction. I think fiction's still managing to, and some fictions are still managing to break the barriers, and have, like, we know that some of them have clearly done, like our own Kumkum Kundli and like now Bhagilakshmi, and there are a bunch of course, the theater shows, but non-fiction hasn't had that level of breakthrough in HEC, but it does have in most of the regionals. It is doing fairly well. So as an overall consumption pie, it's growing, and like Abhishek said, OTT plus social, on the second screen, it's of course growing. So as a repertoire share, it is growing.
It's growing. Okay. So
if I were to, sorry,
please
if I were to just add to that,
please
and I'd like to take,
so
I would like to add from a perspective of, it also depends on how that season ends up being in terms of the innovation, in terms of the scale, in terms of what you've actually brought to the viewer. And therefore, there is this trend of course, you see non-fiction ratings on an average coming down, but there are some seasons that just hit the ball out of the park. And, for example, and I can tell you about one show consistently that delivers and has not dropped ratings over the last so many years is Rohit Shetty's Khatron Ke Khiladi. And I'll see Abhishek smiling there, and big smile from Abhishek. But I'm telling you, every time, that's a blockbuster of a show. It just continues to deliver no matter what. So there are some seasons of shows that just hit the ball out of the park, and it really depends on the kind of innovation, the kind of participation, the kind of engagement, and of course the scale that that property brings.
Yeah.
So, by the way,
just add a bit there. I think the thing Ina said, the innovation, when I said Bangla delivered double or whatever, the spectacles that they're able to create and the innovation they're able to create, and the kind of, thinking of the non-fiction thing also as a cast, and how are you getting the cast right when you're getting the characters in non-fiction, I think is the big differentiator on whether it's doing well or not.
Could you expound on that, on getting the cast right?
So it's not just as, okay, fine, I got 6 stars, right? Like if I look at the current Saregama and the 4 judges, are you casting them with complementary, much like when you cast a fiction show, you're looking at the characters and saying, what emotional dimensions do these guys bring to the table? So it's not just celebrities and judges, but looking at them as how do they play their roles in a setup. I think that's what we say.
Okay, Megha, you would like to add anything there on with regard to casting or the presenters?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the big daddies have spoken, and I think that's really where the reality is. But I just probably add is that, I think the way the ecosystem has changed. There was a time where celebrities were influencers, and today influencers are celebrities. So there is the whole dynamics has changed. So it will be interesting to see that how does the economics of this work, and how do we make this a sustainable proposition? Because the kind of budgets the stars are charging is like gone way out of whack, according to me. So and I don't know how sustainable is this as a business model for anybody, for that matter. While we all love stars and we want big faces, but it has to be at a sensible pricing. So maybe there will be a way now. Platforms across may want to revisit what is an influencer and what is a celebrity, and see how you can make an influencer a bigger celebrity today. I know it's easier said than done, but I think that there is probably a good time to innovate, how we sort of position that. And maybe not every show has to be with that. And that's happening in many shows. It's happening. You have a lot of the influencers who are coming as faces of the show. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. We are, of course,
interesting point. That's very interesting.
Yeah,
point.
so that's one of the things we are exploring ourselves, and more on that as we go along.
Okay, to the audience, please put in your questions. There are a few have come in. If you have any questions for the panel, either for a particular panelist or generally for the panel, please put in your questions. If you have time at the end, I'll certainly take them up. So one of the things is, which are the ways in which social media has affected viewership, interest, etc. So one is the obvious way, that there's a lot of noise, people discuss it a lot. But is there something else that it does in a more fine way, in a less noticed way, let's say, as it were? What does social media do to reality shows? Because I think these are far more, far more an entertaining discussion on social media than, let's say, a piece of fiction. Because unless you know the story, other people can't get into that conversation in a piece of fiction, right? So what is it the best that you expect social media to do for you?
I could just have a point of view here. I mean, and it's not true to only just, non-fiction shows. Just fundamentally, I think social media has become a great platform to bring in the engagement and bring in the dialogues, bring in the conversation for the show, which eventually leads to the show performance success, and I think that hence it's not just about organic, but sometimes inorganic chatter, which helps creating the success of a show. I think it's the lines are blurred, according to me, and it all intermingles eventually. And the overall impact of a performance of the show, it's may not be so black and white to say, okay, this is what social media contributed and this is what advertising contributed, and so on and so forth. I think it's a combination of all of that which leads to the performance of the show. And I personally think it's a great thing. It's a great thing that you have,
it's wonderful.
Or this various platforms to help make a show a success.
Does anybody have a point of view on this?
Yeah, what I think it also does is, in a way, and like I said, some of these properties like Bigg Boss just take over social media, and SOV is like at a 90% when Bigg Boss is on air. But what it does to these cult properties is actually creates the kind of fandom that no other marquee property or show on fiction can do. This fandom is not controllable. I'll tell you, in season 15, when we just opened the Bigg Boss page and we said Bigg Boss season 15, you can't imagine what happened. And that's what happens with Bigg Boss. And the beautiful thing about this is that, it just cuts across all screens.
Yeah.
And there is so much of integration across broadcast, OTT and social media, and all of them sink into this one big marquee property, which is Big Boss. Yeah. And therefore the engagement, the fandom, the gamification, the viewership, the subscription, all of that put together creates, like Pratyusha was saying, a franchise that is so much larger than life. Yeah. And I think that is what social media and all of that put together does, because it helps you, it brings broadcast, and in fact, it brings TV to a non-appointment kind of a conversation, right? Where you don't really have to come at a fixed time, at a fixed place, at a fixed screen. You can do whatever you like with, and this whole thing about touch, feel, play, all of that is so much more possible with social media attached to any marquee show. And that fandom has really climbs to no other level.
Abhishek, many of the shows are traveling to the regions now, and they have already traveled, right? Does it seem to you that these, I mean, I know you specialize in this genre, but does it seem that these shows find it easier to travel to other states because the cultural nuance is relatively lower? I mean, these are culturally neutral shows. Now, Pratyusha, you might say, no, that's not true at all, but because our data shows that, etc. But compared to a piece of fiction, is it easier for these shows to travel? Abhishek, does it seem to you?
In a sense, because what happens in a non-scripted format is that, it's not as neutral, but you're anyways given to adapt. You adapted it for Hindi anyways from a global format, right? So it can be adapted into regional languages.
Right.
But I think the way things are going right now is it doesn't matter whether it's scripted or non-scripted. You see a lot of these stories from within a network that are successful in certain languages going across others. We're producing some for networks in the South, for example, from a same story that's worked for that network. What does happen is the bigger you are in terms of, really glitzy, shiny floor stuff, bigger reality shows, it helps then push up the ante and the scale in the regional market as well. Because now people are getting used to seeing what Hindi has done. References of that are available online. So that helps the regional markets actually make it push their products up on the scale as well. So I think that would be a larger effect of the non-scripted shows. But from what works in any language, I think as networks, everyone would want to take them and replicate in other languages as well, irrespective of scripted or non-scripted.
Also, okay. I think, platforms, companies like ours, where we have a lot of international IPs, that's an opportunity of bringing those international IPs into India as well. So, for example, we have a very successful global IP called Say Yes to the Dress. It's about wedding dresses, and we're bringing a Say Yes to Dress India, so and of course, weddings in India are like, they can be as colorful as it comes. So to create an Indian version of that, and there are many such IPs which can now get explored because there is a platform to bring those IPs. Maybe, and I think personally, OTT has created that opportunity more than maybe the broadcasting environment. So Discovery Plus clearly has become that opportunity for bringing such international shows back into getting the Indian audiences to sample that as well.
I can't let the thing pass on. Oh, it's easier to adapt these, and because we are at Z a big proponent of please do not see it as India. It is many Bharats, and the cultural nuances very high.
So I know, that's why I said that. So
I just want to pick what Megha said. Imagine doing a wedding thing in each region. The thali is different, the couture is different, the rituals are different, and imagine the adaptation that's required. I think it's not better or simpler. It has the same amount of challenges or nuances to be brought about. I think the only place where it becomes maybe a little easier is that the celeb value. If you think of it as celeb, spectacle, and then the format, to that extent that it's the local celebs and it is the spectacle which people expect in the same level is possible.
But the setting, Pratyusha, the setting is I mean, you have to admit the setting is the same. So whether you're in Karnataka or you're in Bengal, the setting remains the same. So in that sense, the risk of of a regional nuance or getting it wrong is lowered. You have to admit that much. Pratyusha does not easily concede. So
for another time. Yeah.
All right. So one question is on the revenue side. Brand, Nina, you mentioned that brand integration is is easier, in the scripted format. But does it audience considered the premium that you get because you can integrate a brand, is that marginal or is it significant? I mean, the increase that you would get for the same type of audience watching a show because you can integrate the brand in a show. I mean, is it significantly more?
Can I go there? I don't think it's just about the, sorry, if it's okay if I can go on that. Yeah. I think the ROI question is not just an advertiser and a point in time question, right? So for these brands, I would look at it as a slightly more nuanced, multi-dimensional ROI, right? So first and foremost, you have the immediate advertiser ROI. Firstly, the non-fiction shows or reality shows have a higher NCCSA skew, which is a higher value TG in any which way, and you get better monetization. And then there is the impact and additional reach, all of those parameters that are happening. But I think what's actually more, and that's where the ROI starts working, is it's also great for subscription revenue, especially in the post-NTO era. When you need to have that salience, you need to have the male of the house who's the decision maker saying, "Mujhe ye channel rakhna hai ki nahi rakhna hai," to have something that is for the entire family, and hence there is value for that channel because of the show, is a definite plus, which adds subscription revenue. The second is this ongoing revenue stream, right? Once you create that property, it's not just what you monetize in that season, your ability to get increment on the same value or the time value over a period of time. And that's huge. And the brand equity that you're building, which you are not putting a number currently on, but what that's adding to the overall brand is also a huge piece. And last but not the least, and that's again where Z makes a lot of money, is the syndication, right? And we've created content bibles and we're syndicating these. So there's advertising revenue, subscription revenue, syndication revenue, and a huge brand value that's added. And hence, I think from all those dimensions, it works. Yes, you have to get it right. If you don't get it right, then none of these do happen and it'll be a big fail. So it's a high risk, high return game. You need to know how to get it.
Okay. Nina, if you'd like to add something there, I have a question for you. Saying that, is the as the budgets are getting larger, is the break-even taking longer for new shows? You just launched a very large show yourself, Nina.
Yeah. So like I was saying, there are some shows in our kitty which have been like there for the longest time. Like I said, Big Boss, we just launched Big Boss season 15.
Right.
And obviously the returns that we get there for the kind of big ticket show it is much larger, and break-evens are that much more easier. Also now today, because we've kind of consolidated digital and TV, right? So even at the starting of the show itself, you've locked in almost 60% of your revenue across 20 brands that have already, engaged with you. But having said that, I think there's a portfolio play here, and there is a portfolio play in non-fiction itself from a network perspective. And obviously all your products and marquee properties will not drive the kind of margins you expect it to drive in subsequent seasons. So the portfolio play comes into place where, you have shows which are marquee cult shows, which continue to deliver and optimize your ROI, which also therefore give you the ability and appetite to introduce these the marquee shows, which obviously will not deliver to you break even in season 1. But if it is again, ball out of the park and it's a great show with great perception, great scale, then in a matter of season 2 or 3, you're able to break even. And of course, that is the ability of how you sustain your portfolio, how you build the ROI in your portfolio, where certain marquee properties continue to deliver, which give you the ability to therefore then create and curate newer marquee properties.
Great, that's great. There's a bunch of questions. I'll toss them very quickly. Please, anybody take them. We've actually almost run out of time. So first question is, which new product categories are helping make these properties big? Or are they all the regular mature categories? I think he means he or she, it's an anonymous thing, so I don't know. So this would be, I think the question is, are they FMCG type of brands which, which back these properties, or are there new product categories which are also coming in for reality shows to advertise on them?
I think it's a mix of both, Shrikant, and you do have the steady state of the usual suspects which have been with us and engaging with the marquee properties. But you do see a new set in terms of EdTech, for example, OTT, for example. You do see telecommunication, handsets, all of that. But I do see, for example, e-wallets, e-commerce. A lot of them have come to the fore, especially in the last 18 months where the whole world has gone digital and online payments and online education and all of that. So some of them have broken the mold and have also become regular advertisers and takers of marquee properties.
Megha, there's a question for you saying Last Dance on Michael Jordan on Netflix, Maradona on Prime Video are huge hits. Can Discovery tell stories of Indian legends that can fly globally?
Yes, absolutely. I wonder whether this person has downloaded Discovery Plus and watches it, because there is some content out there already. But yes, we are exploring that genre as well.
Yeah, I need to add there. You should check out Z5 Breakpoint. We're all trying.
We're all plugging in here.
Yeah, we're all trying. I think the pride in Indian celebrities and Indian performers, and I think we need to do justice to that. And who else other than us if we don't bring them up to the...
True.
Okay, by the way, somebody has a question now. I think anyone can answer this, saying that now we see that a lot of melodrama is entering reality shows, is becoming exactly like fiction. Every second episode has someone crying. Is it due to consumption dropping and the hype around their largeness, or basically to drive more ad revenue? And basically, is this thing, are people being, it's basically the point. I think it's as melodramatic as fiction TV. Does anybody have anything to say?
Can I talk about it? Because I'd seen the data once and it was like, what exactly is happening here? So we keep tracking the minute on minute.
Right.
And funnily enough, when they were presenting, said the singing segments don't rate as much as the story segments. And I was like, bhai, ye singing show hai. And the actual ratings are all coming from the backstory. But I think there's a very interesting thing there, right? And not to say that the singing is not important, but incrementally this is better. Why is that? Because ultimately what these shows are doing, and let's dig back to functional delivery versus emotional delivery. Functionally, yes, it is the music and the performance, but emotionally, these are all about the accessible aspiration that I too, for an underdog, common man, woman on the street, that I too can become a celebrity, is a huge emotional fill. And I think when the backstories happen, that emotion is getting really, really fulfilled, which is why those segments rate so well. But I guess the authenticity with which those stories are told either makes it a rater or a sob story, like somebody who's clearly upset with the amount of sob stories saying. And we've clearly seen it that where the authenticity of the underdog story comes across, it does well. When there is no authenticity, obviously it's a bad sob story.
Okay, one last question we'll take, which is that what attracts big advertisers, even digital first brands such as Bearjuice, to TV and not to OTT? I mean, apart from he's saying in brackets, like, listen, I understand reach is greater here, but is that the only reason, or is there some other reason why?
I think it's about reach, and it's about reach that is being delivered to unfragmented audiences, because on GEC particularly, you have everybody from the cradle to the grave watching you. And as a family brand and an education brand which wants to talk to children as well as talk to the gatekeepers and the decision makers, it's great to be on TV where you will get mass reach and convey your brand communication to the entire family. So TV is one place where you can do that versus digital, which is absolutely fragmented, and you can actually, deliver it to even one person if you wanted to.
I think if I were to add there, the trust on a brand, and we've seen that over data over like now many, many years, the moment the brand advertises on TV, that it's a trustworthy brand, those attributes suddenly shoot up in a very big way, which is the reason why any category brand chooses to put it on TV, because in that environment and that scale, and for the click-through rates on digital marketing also to grow, to go like break out, right? And that trust factor is super important, which is what TV delivers. That's why it's truly a business propeller, because you can keep getting the incremental on performance marketing, but if you need to break out and propel your business, that's where TV really makes a difference.
Okay, so we are about 5 minutes over time, but I'm going to ask a last quick question to all of you, and I ask this almost always with most of our panels. So let me start with you, Abhishek. If we were having the same discussion 3 years later, how would the discussion be different?
If we had the discussion?
The same discussion, we were talking about reality shows, okay, or big budget shows 3 years from now, okay, in 2024, would the discussion be the same or would it be different? And how would it be?
I think it would be the same. I think we would be still looking at making things bigger, better. It's simple. I think consumer psychology, it's getting used to something. You want something new. How does that new come by? You have to push the limits. That's going to happen. Possibly 3 years from now, we would be creating differentiation based on technology, on the experiential part of what a consumer gets. Maybe that would be akin to OTT today, while as linear as OTT would have been far more widespread by then. But yes, we would still be talking about pumping in more money, making things bigger, better, and reaching out to more and more.
Okay. Megha?
Yeah, I guess from a content point of view, not too much might change, but I think from a business point of view, there probably will need to be some more pertinent questions asked on how to make the digital business more sustainable. We are a very low ARPU market, as we know, and the business of running both right now, both the broadcasters have a linear and the digital play, because the linear is making money through advertising and digital is not making money right now. And the idea is that everybody wants to watch the content on digital, but how is it going to make money? So I think ability to pay for content and pay the right price for content, in my view, should be the focus of most of the business platforms. It's good to know that now finally the consumer is ready to pay. So that's a good start. But what she's paying currently is still a long way to go to make it a business sustainable proposition when you compare to the rest parts of the world. So I think it'll be good to see how this model sort of evolves in the next few years. But I think in India, both TV and digital are growing and will continue to grow, strangely enough, that it's not either or. But yes, if it's the next 3 years, it's not that television is going to go anywhere. Both have
No, I didn't mean that. I was in the context of reality shows.
Reality shows, again, it'll be the same. It's just like overall the business needs to be, at some point, some hard calls might need to be taken on how to make this a sustainable business proposition, basically.
Nina?
As we go along, and like Megha said, it is an and market, but I do believe that the lines are blurring between linear and digital. And so to my mind, in the coming 3 years, strategies could change in terms of how we create and, expose our viewers to marquee properties, and how we make them more gamified, perhaps, how we make them more experiential, perhaps. And there's a huge role that technology will eventually play in terms of how these are delivered across the platforms. And that's why, to my mind, viewers are ready to experiment. So I would actually even look at bigger marquee shows coming in where, experimenting across different formats as well. And, right now we are in action, adventure, voyeurism, and talent, but it could go beyond that as well. And with blurring lines and technology, I think you will see a lot more gamification, and you will see a whole lot of engagement, which is very, very more experiential than what it is today.
All right, thank you.
So I do hope that in next 3 years, at least we have one show which is created out of India, which has gone global and become a Squid Games. So yeah, that's my desire and hope.
Pratyusha?
Yeah, I think I see it as three big changes that would happen in the next, at least in the 3-year time horizon. I think because of the pressure that both Meena and Megha touched upon on the charges that celebrities are bringing. So I go back to my casting question, and because consumers are very comfortable with the YouTube influencers or TV influencers, right? You see us, at least as Z, we use a lot of our fiction influencers in the non-fiction shows, which is a big way of controlling the celeb cost. I see that changing in a big way in the next 3 years with a lot of digital celebs and not just the big
TV celebs.
not just TV celebs, right? The Bollywood celebs was the only thing, versus a lot more digital celebs coming into the casting is one big change that I definitely see in the coming 3-year period. And I think in terms of formats, we've all seen the whole, of course, gamification interactivity is happening, but the uncut or a slightly different version of the same show. Like for us, the Survivor that played out on TV is very different from the Survivor Uncut that played out on Z5, and both like exploded in a very big way. And I see a lot of us content creators creating, maybe like 60% will stay the same, but there'll be a 40% which will be unique for TV, unique for social, unique for OTT. I think that's the second format difference that will play out. And in terms of genre, and I'm like crystal gazing here a little, when you look at the Korea market and the whole gaming and watching gaming and how that's really big, and if you are a K content fan, I think that genre of gaming in entering life, and I think that's a genre which is high potential. Nobody has like really done anything with this. We're still staying in the traditional performance ones, and gaming is the next performance place. I think that's where I see a big change happening in the next 3 years.
Thank you so much. This is great. I think this is really a very interesting discussion. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you, audience.
And just for that person who asked about the sports documentary, please go and check out the Maradona documentary on Discovery Plus. It says Who Killed Maradona. It's really cool.
All right. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.